So, welcome everybody to another episode of the Brand MUSE interview series. I am here with Martin Huntbach, whose name I always stumble over. I don't know why. But Martin is the co-founder of Jammy Digital, which is a WordPress design agency, web design agency in the UK. Martin and I met at the Upreneur conference a couple of years ago. And in full disclosure, I actually interviewed him at the last Upreneur conference and had some technical difficulties. And sadly, that interview wasn't publishable. So I am thanking Martin for returning to be interviewed again. And so Martin, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me on the show. Well, as you mentioned, I run a WordPress web design agency along with my better half, Lindsay. And we also have a podcast where we teach people how to improve their websites as well. And we have a membership site where, if people don't want to hire us to build their website, they can get in at a very low cost and learn how to build a website with our methodology and our teachings. So, yeah, that's what we do.
So what's the name of your podcast in case people don't make it to the end of the interview?
It's Make Your Mark Online.
Cool. And what's the membership site?
That's exactly the same name. So makeyourmarkonline.net. And yeah, that's exactly where to go if you want to find out about that.
Well, cool. So one of the things, one of the themes of the show is to talk to creative entrepreneurs and professionals like yourself on how they build their brands as well as the brands of others. So why don't we start off by talking a little bit about kind of how you built the Jammy Digital brand. So where do you show up? Why do you show up there? What do you do when you get there? How have you built that brand?
Well, it stemmed off lots of little different businesses over the years. Jammy Digital was supposed to be a kind of extra sister business of our main web design business. It just so happens to be that kind of swallowed everything else and took over. So that's our main business, Jammy Digital. And that's the business that we put our heart and soul into. That's the one we spend all of our time into. I suppose there's a bit of a lesson there for anybody who has multiple hats, trying to manage different businesses. There's always going to be one that tends to, take ownership of most of your time and attention. And yeah, we definitely found that with Jammy Digital.
So how do you promote Jammy Digital? Where do you show up on social media, or how do you go about that?
Well, we're very much very particular about how we spend our time. So one of the main focuses that we have is on the content that we produce. So we focus a majority of our time in creating really helpful, valuable content that could be, we could charge for it. It's that good. That's how much time and effort we put into it. So that's where the majority of our efforts go into our blog. Obviously, our podcast is there as well, which we release every week. And we generally don't promote ourselves enough. But we do have a Facebook group, which is where we do a lot of our, critiques. We have a free Facebook group that people can join. They put their name in and they get a free website critique, and we share quite a lot of content in there. So I would say that's probably the main avenue that we use to promote our business and our knowledge, is a combination of the podcast, our blog content, and this free Facebook group. Seems to have helped, especially with the membership that we launched as well. Most of our members, I would say 90% of them, have actually been in our Facebook group, consumed our content before, and maybe even had a free website critique, which is something we do for free. So that seems to help from a marketing point of view.
Where do people generally find you for the first time?
Well, we get a lot of our traffic from search. So obviously in the web design space, we talk a lot about SEO and about how to promote your own content. So we do get a lot of traffic from search engines. And since we really started making a proper effort with content marketing and promoting that really, in-depth content, that's when we really saw our traffic numbers shoot up. In 2017 through to 2018, we're pretty much 10 times the amount of traffic that we were getting through the content marketing efforts. So that's where we get a lot of our website traffic. Yeah. It was just so happened that up until sort of 2017, we were preaching it, but we weren't necessarily practicing it. And we were doing it for clients, but we weren't really doing it for ourselves. Mm-hmm. So we really sat down and focused our efforts on answering every question that people have ever asked us. Not necessarily, how to get better rankings on Google, but what's involved when we build a website? Why do we only use WordPress versus other platforms, actually getting into the nooks and crannies of people, what people might think and questions that people might have before wanting to work with us. And I think that's really, really changed the game for us. Not just thinking about that big hero piece of content that gets thousands of visitors a day, but actually the content that people actually want. Why do we price our services at a certain level versus other agencies that do it at a different level? What's the difference? These are the real conversion blog posts that really tend to get the inquiries.
So that was going to be kind of my question, which is, you talk about the publishing content and being valuable content, but those pieces of content are, for the most part, your podcasts and blog posts on your own site.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the blog posts and the podcast. We've not blogged that much recently, but we did a lot of it last year and the year before. So, but the podcast really since July last year, which is when we launched it, that's where we've put a lot of our effort in.
So, how are you getting traffic to your blog?
Well, like I say, lots of traffic from search engines. We do a lot. We're part of a number of communities as well. So we have lots of, we distribute our content through private platforms as well.
Okay.
Obviously, we have an email list, which we make sure we utilize as much as possible. LinkedIn, we're creeping on LinkedIn. There's not many avenues that we use. And when we do, we're very particular about how we do it, because we know that you could just spend all of your time promoting your content and none of the time actually producing it. So we have been quite particular about where we spend our time.
So you have kind of, and much like I do, you have kind of a split audience between people who could conceivably be your clients, so people who you could be building websites for, but then also probably people who are website designers or have agencies that they're just starting off who want to understand how you're successful, why you do what you do, how to help their clients better. How do you split out? How do you split out that content between those two kind of customer avatars of your own?
Well, funnily enough, we do feel strongly about the way that we do things as an organization, and the way that we produce our content, it comes across as very confident. We do things this way because we know it works. And actually what we've realized is the content that we're writing for our, normal brick and mortar businesses or personal brands, those people that don't necessarily, take on clients for web design or design services, that content is for them. However, we have seen quite a lot of our, not competitors, but people who also offer agency type services actually consume quite a lot of our content as well, because they say, oh, they know what they're talking about. They've got an incredible resource there. We're also going to download it and use it for our clients, which is really interesting. And we have seen an off-spin actually, because I would probably say there's in our membership, and we only recently launched it, so there's like 35 members in there. Probably 5 of those people are agency owners in some way, shape or form. We have graphic designers, we have people who offer video services. Actually, somebody that's, I think he's been on your show, Cole Gray, mm-hmm. Pixels Inc. Yeah, so he's one of our members because, he understands the importance of having a great website. But he can consume that content and he can learn more about it. But he can also relay that to his, design clients as well if they have any questions. If he's designing a brochure, things he might need content, for instance, and the website may come in. So there's lots of different benefits really for everybody, not just a business owner who has a brick and mortar B2C type business.
So how do you stay, as a website design agency, it's imperative that you bring, contemporary points of view and a knowledge of your industry and what's going to cut through the clutter and differentiate people within, on the web. How do you stay inspired and how do you stay up to date on those things?
Well, one of the things I tend to not do, and this is probably as important as the things that I do, one of the things I don't do is I don't just focus my energy on the web design, techie stuff. So, for instance, there's lots of web designers there that just go to like WordPress conferences or, design conferences, for instance. I like to keep my, dip my toe in the water in lots of different platforms. Like, for instance, the event that we went to, Upreneur, it's not necessarily for web designers, it's not necessarily for designers, but you get to meet lots of different people, lots of entrepreneurs. There's people on stage that speak about things like productivity, tools to keep you more productive. There's also people that teach you about live streaming and content and blogging and videos. There's lots of different knowledge out there if you're prepared to spend a little bit of money, spend a little bit of time going out and actually just giving yourself that tool of knowledge. Can be extremely powerful, as well as keeping up to date with latest design trends and reading lots of books. Again, not just about web design, not just about SEO, but actually reading a lot about business and about growth, because that's really what matters. A website, much like a logo, is very much a tool to allow you to be a better business and be more successful. And as long as we all agree with our products and services is just a tool and it is just a way for our clients to become more successful, then that's when we can start to think about how we can help our clients' businesses grow, rather than I'm just going to build you a website that's on trend at the minute.
So there are a million website design agencies out there, and being successful is all about understanding your niche and being differentiated. So how do you differentiate Jamie Digital? What is your towering strength?
I think our core purpose when we do anything when it comes to websites is to be as transparent as possible. Be completely open and honest, because in the web design space and in the SEO space, because we teach a lot about SEO as well, it can feel a little bit like the Wild West. There's lots of people out there that say, oh, well, it's very technical, but if you give me money, I'll be able to do it for you. And you don't really, need to focus on the techie stuff. We'll do it all for you. Just hand over your cash. Whereas we actually put an awful lot of emphasis on being completely transparent. So we don't ask for budgets when we speak to our clients. We very much say, these are our prices, like it or lump it. You don't have to have that awkward conversation with an agency where they're trying to get your budget off you and you're trying to say, I don't know. And that's a very difficult, and it can be like walking into a car showroom and having that, that barter with that person. So we like to leave the barriers as low as possible. If you want to work with us, our prices. We may charge more than some of the competitors out there, but we don't mind. We're getting enough clients as it is. And if you want to work with us because of our experience, because of the results that we get from practicing what we preach, because of our design of our website, which obviously plays a huge part in the design space, people always compliment our brand. And obviously the content is so helpful as well, that's what draws people in. And our transparent, honest approach is what allows people to get in touch with us and not feel overwhelmed.
So that was actually a question I asked you when I interviewed you in London. We talked a little bit about it. That I get a lot of questions from people saying, how do I price my work? Or should I publish the prices of my work because every project is different and I don't want to pigeonhole myself into a particular price point when, I could get a gigantic client, or vice versa. I don't want to put huge prices out there and then turn my back on people who may not be up to that level. So how do you handle that? I know that you publish your prices on your website, so you give us a kind of a baseline. Is that how you approach it, or how do you deal with that scaling of costs?
Yeah, there's usually a few concerns that people have when it comes to pricing. One of them is, I don't want to pigeonhole myself. I don't want to leave myself with a pricing table so that I have to serve people at that price. Another issue is the fact that you don't want your competitors to find out.
Right.
And obviously every project is different, and it's the same with us, and it's the same in whatever industry you're a part of. So that really is kind of one of those things that people have. It's one of the main concerns people have. There's a few ways that we tackle it. One way is we say the minimum price that we charge is this. Now that does two things. It obviously sets us to say that, we don't have to have a conversation with everybody. If they only have £500 to spend and they don't have £3,500 or £5,000 to spend, then they automatically rule themselves out. So which means I'm not wasting our time and not wasting their time having an hour discussion trying to work out that they just simply don't have the budget. We don't pigeon ourselves. We don't have put ourselves in a corner because we say it's from that amount. So we rule out the people who can't afford us, but we also say this can go up, and we have the same conversation with every prospect. So if they are getting in touch, they've pretty much already seen our prices because we have a big pricing page on our website and it's unmissable. So people that are getting in touch already know what we charge. However, if they think they're going to get $3,500, we say the same thing to everybody. We have a flexible project here. This isn't you saying, that's exactly what I want from a website, and that's the final piece. You are allowed to change the goalposts if you wish, as long as you realize that it's a flexible tariff. So if you say 2 months down the line, partway through a project, that you want to add this extra bit, that is completely fine. It's absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. It'll just adjust the price. That's all. It's a very simple conversation that I have with people, and it'll say has potential to move up and up. It's obviously not going to go down, but it has the potential to move up. So don't worry about it. So that's come from a place of it potentially could be a negative, but because I outline that at the front, then obviously the quote that I send out is based on the things that I include, and it's always different. It's very rare that we charge that $3,500 that we say is the minimum price.
Right. So you found that the biggest, the biggest thing to kind of weed out are the people who can't meet your basic price point. And I found the same thing, that, it takes so much time and so much energy to deal with people who, aren't ready to make the investment that's necessary to engage you, because you are an expert in your field. You have a great, portfolio and case studies about who you've helped and how you've done it. Talk a little bit about your podcast, why you chose to do it, what the format of it is, and how it's benefited your business.
Yeah, so the podcast is interesting, actually. I've always wanted to do a podcast. Lots of friends that run podcasts, but we wanted it to be a bit different. I didn't just want to interview people like Pat Flynn at Smart Passive Income, or like Lewis Howes. There's lots of interview shows out there. So me and Lindsay, my wife, decided to do a co-host podcast where we did not interview guests, because we have, obviously, we're a married couple. We have rapport that you can't just get out of thin air. We know each other. We have a laugh on the podcast. She has her opinions, and sometimes they differ from my opinions. She comes from a marketing and copywriting place, and I come from a design and SEO place. And SEO and copywriting sometimes doesn't play very nice. So that's quite interesting when we have that conversation. And again, she has her opinions and I have mine. So we kind of have it out on the podcast sometimes, which is quite nice. We've got a lot of, obviously, personal stories that we like to loop in there as well and keep people entertained. But more than anything, the podcast is a way for us to say, imagine that we were creating an online course like we do with our membership. How would we break that up into mini chapters? How would we break that up into mini episodes? And that's what we do. So we were talking a little bit about pricing. So in the episode prior to the one that's out this week, actually last week's episode, episode 31 was actually, should you put your prices on your website? It just so happens to be that you've just asked that question. So I can then send people to that episode to say, if you're struggling with your pricing and you're not sure, then go and listen to this episode. It's just another way for us to be more open, more honest, and more transparent, really. But most of the people who listen to that show, I listened to that before they joined our membership. They joined our Facebook group, then they listen to the podcast, and they're consuming our content, which allows us to be top of mind. So if anybody ever did need a web designer, or they needed to refer people to a web designer, then hopefully we'll be top of mind and we'll be the people they recommend.
Have you found that your podcast has been generating leads? I mean, when you're getting a new business lead, do people say, "Oh, I heard your podcast episode and it sounds like you know what you're talking about"? That establishment of an expert kind of brand, and that leading to new biz leads?
Yeah, and I think there's a side effect of having things like a podcast, and one of which is that authority that you get from it. So what's it allowed us to do is, when we do speak to people and they get in touch about a website, yes, they may have listened to the podcast, but more than anything, if they're getting in touch, they already know that we're experts, and they will listen to us and they'll take everything we say as gospel because we've taken the time to have a podcast, have a membership. It's just an example of, if we'd have written a book, for instance, they take everything we say as gospel, and it allows the sales conversations to be so much easier. We were having a conversation with a prospect towards the end of last year, who said, we were talking to him about transitioning from a corporate type website into more of a personal brand. And she was nodding her head because she'd heard it all before. So we were saying, these are the things that you can do. It's not going to make you look smaller if you transition into a personal brand because of this, 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 and then this. And she said, yeah, I remember that podcast that you did. So it allows the conversations to be so much easier. And I kind of realized, I got to a stage where I realized that this content was working is when a year ago, 2 years ago, when we were having an hour conversations, 2 hour conversations with people before they agreed to move forward, they're now down to like 20-minute conversations because they already know they want to work with us at the point because they've consumed so much content, because they know the prices, because we've got an element of trust there, that all they need to do is ring us up, clarify a couple of things, and then get the ball rolling. And that's why when we send out a proposal, we're pretty much certain that they're gonna move forward. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sending them a proposal. So we don't send out 10 proposals and get maybe 2 or 3 back. We're sending out 10 proposals and maybe getting 9 or 10 of them back to move forward with projects. And I couldn't do that without the effort that we put into the content and the podcast included.
Does I find this in my business, and I've started to, give people ballpark proposal prices before I actually write a detailed proposal, because you can spend a couple hours writing a proposal, a really good one, and then if people might have sticker shock, or if they haven't signed up to the idea of that investment yet, it can be a total waste of time. Exactly. And so I would think that publishing your prices on your website and then also having that conversation beforehand is kind of set the stage for the proposal. So it makes sense that you would getting 9 out of 10 accepted rather than 1 out of 10, which is spinning your wheels. Can you talk a little bit about your hurdles or any kind of struggles, challenges you've had in building your agency or building the brand of your agency that might help other people?
Yeah, I think not being afraid to outsource certain tasks. There are things in our business that we struggle with. Less so with clients and more so with our own promotion. So we talk about the amount of effort that we put into content, but it takes an awful lot of time to run that kind of agency. So when it comes to changing our own website, tweaking things to reflect what we're doing with our content and our business, we might outsource some of them tasks. We might have somebody, of Upwork, for instance, who we work with every now and again to say, you know what, I need a new page added to my website. I haven't got the time to do it because I'm so busy with client stuff. But actually, can you do that for me? Yeah. We've recently outsourced our podcasts, and yes, we get them transcribed anyway. But one of our members reached out to us and said, "Would you mind if I give a go at writing some of your podcasts out as blog posts?" So we're putting out the content, but we've not necessarily got an awful lot of time to do a lot of the promotion ourselves. So we're trying to outsource our own tasks to begin with, so that, in the future we might be able to outsource some more client work to, developers and things like that. But I think don't be afraid to outsource as early as possible. I've been using freelancers since I started the business, since I pretty much read the first business book, which was 4-Hour Work Week. And although, take it with a pinch of salt, I absolutely latched onto the fact that when you're too busy, somebody else can be doing something at the same time, and it doesn't always have to cost a lot.
So when in the stage of your business did you start getting help like that? Was it fairly early, or did you?
It was pretty early, especially because, when you're starting out, there's always a few techie bits. Even if you're as knowledgeable in the web design space, you might not be as knowledgeable in things like video editing. And that's one of the first tasks that we got somebody to do, was paid somebody off one of these websites to actually design us an animated video. So it was really nice to see that process. We used that video for a while in the agency that we're running, but that kind of thing is scary because you're putting money into it and it might not always work out, and I do understand that. But one of the things we teach in our membership and the course that's coming out next is actually how to outsource website tasks, because for you to understand how to move that button from the left hand side of your website to the right hand side could take you an hour. You've got to read content, you might have to watch a few videos. Getting someone off Fiverr to do it for $10 is going to be worth its weight in gold, because you don't have to work out how to do it, and you're building up relationships with these people. And as long as you're safeguarding yourself and protecting yourself and, making sure you're doing your backups, having somebody like that will allow you to free up your time and send off requests whenever you need to will, it's gonna make your life a lot better, I think. So as soon as you can do that, the better.
So one of the questions, and I asked you this in London, but I'll ask you it again. Is there a, personal manifesto or mantra that you try to live your life by?
Yeah, I think for me, it would be to surround yourself with the people that you would like to, surround yourself with. So be very specific about who you have around you. And this includes clients as well. One of the biggest issues that we've had over the years is taking on clients for the money, because we needed the money and we needed that project because we had some expenses, and we're taking on clients, even if they are paying more, we're taking on clients that are not the right fit. We're taking on clients that focus on the wrong things out of their website when really they should be focusing on using it to grow their business. But instead, somebody, wires get crossed and you end up spending 18 months designing a website when it should have been up in 4 months because of corporate rubbish, really. So that kind of scenario has happened more times than I would like. So I would say be very careful about who you surround yourself with, in terms of communities and growth of your business, but also be very careful about who you take on as a client, because it can have such a damaging effect on your productivity in your day. So be careful about who you surround yourself with.
So I usually end that question, but one other popped in my mind. How do you stay inspired?
I think, like we said earlier, really is consuming content on whatever level that you can always keeps me moving forward. So if I'm having a pretty down day, if I'm having a pretty glum day, maybe, something's happened in my personal life and I feel like I need to be moving my business forward, I will find a way to fill my head with a little bit of knowledge, keep myself moving forward. That might be, getting out of the house and listening to an audiobook, going for a walk, for instance, or producing a little bit of content. Maybe, looking at some of the questions our members have asked and actually just keep moving forward. Quite a lot of the time, the content that we produce comes from people asking us questions. So there's lots of, actually producing content and consuming content is everything for me. But definitely if I need a little bit of a push to get out of bed in the morning, which is not often, I will quite often watch some training that I've paid for online, watch a presentation that somebody's done, watch a TED Talk, that kind of thing. It instantly gives me that hit that I need, which is really powerful, I think.
Well, cool. So, Martin, thanks so much for your time. So how can people get in touch with you and Jammy Digital?
So the domain is jammydigital.com. Feel free to check out the website. The membership is makeyourmarkonline.net. And obviously the same podcast as well. But if you did want a free website critique, then we offer those in our Facebook group every Wednesday afternoon. And that's jammydigital.com/Facebook. And that will redirect you to the group. Feel free to jump in there. We review about 4 or 5 websites every Wednesday afternoon. So, yeah, feel free to drop your name in there and we'll take a look at your website and tell you what we would do to improve it.
So you do that do you do that live or you do that on...
Yeah, it's a live video. We jump in there every Wednesday and we answer questions and things live on the call. So it's worked really well for us, and we love websites through and through. So this is our opportunity to actually look at a website for the first time as if we were a user and we'd never seen the website before, and actually offer a live critique with you guys on the call. So yeah, it's fun.
That's great. That's great value. So Martin, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your coming back after our London interview debacle. I appreciate your time.
You're very welcome. Thanks so much for the interview. Really enjoyed it.
Bye. Let's see you next time.
Bye.